Donald Trump has just declared a national emergency and issued an executive order in an effort to protect the U.S. power grid from foreign adversaries. There's a fear that our national security and our economy could be compromised by someone targeting our electrical systems. Now, this might just be a standard preventative measure, but it's coming amid growing military tensions between the U.S. and China. For the longest time, people have said that we are entering a Cold War with China. And due to something called Thucydides' trap, people fear that as China rises in global power, eventually a war will break out between the U.S. and China. And it certainly seems like we're closer than ever. Recently in the South China Sea, China sent a strike group near Taiwan. The U.S. responded by sending warships. Now China is claiming they have expelled a U.S. naval warship, and the U.S. Navy says that's not true. But ever since a U.S. aircraft carrier had to evacuate most of its personnel due to the coronavirus, there's been a concern that the U.S. looks weak and China will take advantage. But it's not just about the military, and it's not just about the U.S. and China. There are many other countries involved. A new leaked intel report shows several countries believing China is covering up the extent of the coronavirus, allowing them to escape responsibility, but also resulting in massive damage to many other countries. I may be connecting dots that should not be connected. So I don't want to pretend like this is all part of one big growing military, escalation or Cold War or potential for World War III. But it does seem to me that these things are at least connected a little bit. For years, people have written that war is coming, and maybe it won't come. Maybe what we're seeing is just a little bit of Cold War saber rattling. But it does seem like this emergency declaration has to do with fears that we're entering a very real conflict. I mean, the U.S. is saying China's engaging in nuclear testing. China's denying it, and it's hard to know who to trust. We have also heard from Mike Pompeo, as well as many others, that the U.S. educational system has been infiltrated by China and that this runs very deep. In fact, the U.S. is worried about Chinese spies even working for U.S. news agencies. So let's take a look at exactly what's going on and why Donald Trump has declared a national emergency. And then I'll show you various stories. And I want to make sure I'm very clear. It doesn't necessarily mean, just because I'm showing you these stories, that it's painting a full picture of what's going on. But I do think these are things to be concerned about that may be connected, but maybe not. The first story about from the Hill, Trump issues executive order to protect power grid from attack. Before we get started, go to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There are several ways you can give, but the best thing you can do, just share this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Also, I'll let you know I have another channel for those that aren't familiar at youtube.com/timcastnews. I know that many people don't realize I have multiple channels. But now let's just jump to the story. The Hill reports, President Trump on Friday issued an executive order declaring a national emergency over threats to the U.S. power system, taking steps to defend the grid against cyber attacks and foreign interference. The executive order bans the use of equipment for the power grid that was manufactured by a company under the control of a foreign adversary, or the buying of any equipment that poses a national security threat. Quote, additional steps are required to protect the security, integrity, and reliability of bulk power system electric equipment used in the United States, Trump wrote. In light of these findings, I hereby declare a national emergency with respect to the threat to the United States bulk power systems. The order also established a task force to protect the power grid from attacks and share risk management information to prevent interference. Members of the task force will include the Secretaries of Commerce, Defense, and Homeland Security, as well as the Director of National Intelligence. Trump noted in the order that the power system is a target for those seeking to commit malicious acts against the U.S., pointing to concerns around cyber attacks in particular. A successful attack on our bulk power system would present significant risk to our economy, human health, and safety, and would render the United States less capable of acting in defense of itself and its allies, Trump wrote. Secretary of Energy Dan Brulette applauded the executive order, saying in a statement that it would greatly diminish the ability of foreign adversaries to target our critical electrical infrastructure. Today, President Trump demonstrated bold leadership to protect America's bulk power systems and ensure the safety and prosperity of all Americans. It is imperative the bulk power system be secured against exploitation and attacks by foreign threats. The order establishes the Secretary of Energy as the official tasked with identifying equipment currently in use in the bulk power systems that poses a risk and working to take out and replace the equipment. The Secretary is also in charge of creating a list of pre-qualified vendors that are deemed safe to work with. Now, this isn't necessarily about China. This could be about many other countries, and it seems that this is just a generally smart thing to do. But there have been very real fears that Chinese smartphone companies are spying on us. Many people are concerned that Xiaomi, a phone company, is ignoring your privacy requests on phones, as well as Huawei. It's been kind of a rumor, urban legend, or conspiracy theory that using Chinese-made goods results in them spying on you, that they've hidden secret antennas and other things inside of their products. Now, it may or may not be true, but because of these fears, we may be seeing actions taken by Donald Trump. But there are other very real reasons why Trump may be seeking to protect the electrical grid. I mean, it seems to be the first place you'd want to attack. Take out our source of energy so we can't fight back. Makes sense, right? Well, recently, China has claimed it expelled the U.S. a U.S. naval warship from the South China Sea. Now, I do find it interesting that the New York Post has framed it as though China just did this. Well, let me tell you something. China is claiming they did this. We don't know for sure. In fact, the U.S. Navy is disputing this. But nonetheless, we had a Chinese strike group move near Taiwan. It's not the first time this has happened. It's not the first time the U.S. has sent military forces into the South China Sea. But as I stated a few weeks ago, China views the South China Sea as their territory. By us sending in warships, they're going to argue we're trespassing or provoking, and it's exactly what's happening. Let's read the story. The New York Post reports, China's military banished a, quote, provocative U.S. Navy destroyer from the South China Sea this week amid escalating tensions in the region, with the communist country also expected to squash more pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The Chinese People's Liberation Army said the Navy vessel had been expelled from the oil-rich stretch of water after entering Chinese waters and called on the U.S. to instead focus on its national epidemic situation, referring to the coronavirus crisis. Quote, the provocative actions of the United States seriously violated relevant international law norms, seriously violated China's sovereignty and security interests, artificially increased regional security risks, and were prone to cause unexpected incidents. Li Huamen, a spokesman for the People's Liberation Army command that oversees the area, said in a statement. Tensions have been high in the region over the past month, with a dispute between Malaysia and China over oil-drawing U.S., Chinese, and Australian warships. The waters have immense strategic value, carrying over $3 trillion in trade every year, and believed to hold immense gas and oil reserves, with China, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines making competing territorial claims in the region. Now, many people have said that China is a paper tiger, and they wouldn't actually go to war with us. We have too much technological prowess. But what you need to understand about rising power is that China is consistently getting stronger. And though they may not have the power to go up against us right now, they are certainly trying to increase their power. How do you respond to that? I think that if China took action against us, we wouldn't do anything. We'd be very reticent to actually retaliate. Now, on top of all of this, the U.S. has accused China of conducting low-level nuclear test blasts, as if to make everything a whole lot worse. Now, China, of course, is dismissing this, saying it's essentially not true. China dismisses U.S. claim it conducted low-level nuclear tests. Beijing says it is committed to a moratorium on nuclear tests after U.S. claimed China may have conducted secret blasts. Now, there is a lot of context in this escalation and the potential for real international conflict that would be very difficult to get through literally everything. But I have done several segments on this, so make sure you check out the rest of my videos. We have seen Donald Trump order the U.S. Navy to sink Iranian gunboats if they swarm and harass our ships again. We have seen Russian planes, naval planes, jets, I should say, intercepting U.S. reconnaissance jets as well. So there is serious escalation amid various countries right now, notably Venezuela, Iran, China, Russia, the U.S., and NATO. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean there will be war, but there is a growing concern that because of the shutdown in our economies, because of COVID, people are getting worried. I mean, they're withholding food. Tensions are escalating in various ways. Borders are erecting between countries that shouldn't even have borders, like in the Schengen zone. So if a country like France and Germany are going to put up a border between each other, if even in the U.S., New Mexico's Democratic governor shuts down entrance into a city, well, then we are going to see people shoring up their defenses. and this could lead to a serious escalation. Now, over at CNN, they say, despite Trump executive order, meat processing plants struggle to stay open. This is another executive order Donald Trump has taken in the interest of national security. These food processing plants are being shut down due to governmental orders and the COVID-19 epidemic, but it's showing another weakness the U.S. has. And as I just mentioned, many countries are now withholding exports of grains and other foods. In the U.S., we're facing a very serious food shortage. Now, this is kind of an aside. It's not necessarily having to do with military escalation, but I show this to bring up the point of desperation. When a country becomes desperate, doesn't have food, well, they might actually lash out. I don't think it will be the U.S. considering we're extremely wealthy, but even we are in trouble due to the economic shutdown, and perhaps it's a good reason why we should reopen things. But outside of direct military conflict, there is counterintelligence efforts and soft war and Cold War. Fox News reports leaked Western intel dossier reveals how China deceived the world about coronavirus. Most of us know exactly what's going to be in this dossier. That China was withholding this, that they knew about human-human transmission. The World Health Organization gave us misinformation. That's all here. And it's not just the United States anymore. So perhaps many people who are angry with the president can back off a bit, because now we have many other countries joining in to say something similar. Fox says, a research dossier compiled by the so-called Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance states that China intentionally hid or destroyed evidence of the coronavirus outbreak, leading to the loss of tens of thousands of lives around the world. The 15-page document from the intelligence agencies of the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand was obtained by Australia's Saturday Telegraph newspaper and states that China's secrecy amounted to an assault on international transparency. The dossier touches on themes that have been discussed in media reports about the outbreak of the virus, including an initial denial by China that the virus could be transmitted between humans, the silencing or disappearing of doctors who tried to speak up, the destruction of evidence in laboratories, and refusal to provide live samples to international scientists working on a vaccine. Specifically, the file notes that China began censoring news of the virus on search engines and social media beginning December 31st, deleting terms including SARS variation, Wuhan seafood market, and Wuhan unknown pneumonia. 3 days later, on January 3rd, China's National Health Commission ordered virus samples to be either moved to designated testing facilities or destroyed, while simultaneously issuing a no publication order related to the disease. The Saturday Telegraph report includes a timeline of Chinese obfuscation. They mention, perhaps most damningly, the dossier states that Chinese authorities denied that the virus could be spread between humans until January 20th, despite evidence of human-human transmission from early December. The file is similarly unsparing about the World Health Organization, stating that it towed the Chinese line about human-human transmission, despite the fact that officials in Taiwan raised concerns as early as December 31st, as did experts in Hong Kong on January 4th. Why didn't the World Health Organization tell us? Now, let me stop. We'll play a little bit of domestic politics here. Many people who hate Donald Trump have argued that he has been bad, his response has been bad, but now we can see U.S. allies, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, they're saying the same thing about the World Health Organization and about China. I have to wonder then, if there are spies in Chinese media, why we're seeing such pro-China media coming out about this. Perhaps there are people who want to avoid an all-out war. That I understand. But what do you do when China is withholding information? Not only that, when there's Chinese trolls online spreading disinformation, harming the response of our allies, countries like Spain or Italy, or places like Taiwan. We could argue country or not, but Taiwan was a victim of this, same as Spain and Italy. At a certain point, if they're saying this was intentional, I mean, China knew they would be killing our people, and they did it on purpose. Combine that with the recent military escalations we've seen between them and other countries, as well as the fear due to the coronavirus pandemic, and I think we're sitting on a powder keg, and hopefully things don't get worse than they are now. But when I saw the report that Donald Trump had issued this executive order, the only thing I could think was that Trump is concerned that's the first place they'll strike. I've spoken with national security experts over the past several years, and there is a real fear that our electrical grid can be taken out. We also have the very famous Rachel Maddow conspiracy theory that during the height of the Russiagate nonsense, that Russia would take out the electrical grid in Fargo in the winter. Oh no. Very conspiratorial. But let's be real. Possible. Just extremely fear-mongery and unlikely. Well, as tensions escalate because of the coronavirus, the fears become more warranted, I must admit. And I've ragged on Rachel Maddow for this for a long time. At the time, there was no real reason to believe Russia would arbitrarily just shut off the power in Fargo. But now we're dealing with fear and desperation. Now we're seeing real military escalations. And Russia, while we're not necessarily the same Cold War enemies we used to be, we're certainly adversarial. And we saw that Russian jet intercept the U.S. reconnaissance jet. So who knows what might happen. Now, one of the more interesting things to come out of this dossier and recent rumors in the media, John Roberts of Fox News says, sources say not all 17 intelligence agencies agree that the lab was the source of the virus because there is not yet a definitive smoking gun. But confidence is high among 70 to 75% of the agencies. Don't let someone in the media deceive you. We are getting numerous reports that the U.S. intelligence agencies are investigating the Wuhan laboratory as the origin of the virus, and they believe that to be the place. In fact, Donald Trump has said as much. I think this is yes, here we have it. New York Post. Trump claims he has seen evidence leaking coronavirus to Wuhan Lab. Think about where we were last month. You weren't even allowed to talk about this. You were ridiculed as a conspiracy theorist. Tom Cotton, a Republican, came out very early saying we should consider the possibility it leaked from a lab. And they mocked him in the media. Now we have the U.S. intelligence agencies, potentially the Five Eyes spy club, and Donald Trump saying there's at least some evidence. Now, of course, the media is trying to spin this to make it seem like Trump is either saying it definitively or that he's pushing conspiracy theories. Let's all calm down a little bit. Trump says he has seen the evidence. Confidence is high in many intelligence agencies, but we don't have definitive proof yet. It just seems to be the simple solution. And now we're seeing even this interesting story. Chinese lab conducted extensive research on deadly bat viruses, but there is no evidence of an accidental release. The Washington Post entertained the possibility only a few weeks ago, but has typically been against the president. I find it rather interesting that they've now come to the point where they're like, well, the labs were doing this, but there's a lot of other news here. Forbes writing that the Wuhan Lab as coronavirus source is gaining traction. This from just the other day. Now, outside of all of this, I think it's important to point out just because it may have leaked from a lab doesn't mean it's an act of war. An act of war or it's intentional. But it is important to point out that China may be responsible for this, and thus explains why they would be covering it up. They don't want to take responsibility. Trump is talking about, some kind of punishment or retribution. This from CNN. Trump administration draws up plans to punish China over coronavirus outbreak. We now know that they're trying to obfuscate what happened and cover it up. It may actually be worse than that. They may have been neglectful and may have breached one of their labs. But regardless, we know that they were withholding information. This seems to be the accepted mainstream point as of right now. While we don't know entirely for sure, it does stand to reason China takes a lot of the responsibility for how bad this has gotten. As I've stated before, we can look at many of the Democratic mayors, governors, and Donald Trump and accuse everybody of doing the right or wrong thing in the coronavirus pandemic in the U.S., but even if we accuse Trump of being too lax early on, of Cuomo, of not putting the lockdown in place, or Bill de Blasio, the fact remains China deserves 95 to 99% of the blame because they were withholding samples, they were lying, they were arresting people and trying to cover this up, resulting in a delayed response from everybody else. So not necessarily an act of war, but still some responsibility. Well, Mike Pompeo emerges as point man in war of words with China. His critics say he's too busy attacking China to coordinate a global response to the pandemic. His supporters say he's holding Beijing to account. Not that long ago, back in February, Mike Pompeo warned of Chinese infiltration in American schools. There are many stories that are starting to emerge that paint a picture of a Cold War between the U.S. and China. We may now be seeing military escalation, which could lead to a hot war. I don't know when. I don't know the likelihood, maybe no likelihood at all. As I've stated before, it could just be connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. And it could just be that because we're all locked in our houses and kind of bored, we're focused on what may actually be normal. For all we know, these stories happen all the time. We just don't really care about them. But it definitely does seem like things are getting worse, especially with the recent statements from Mike Pompeo, as well as several arrests by the FBI of U.S. academics who were lying about working with China or in on the take, taking money from China when they weren't supposed to, or, again, lying about it. The South China Morning Post says the China-U.S. Cold War heats up with coronavirus conspiracy and cover-up charges. Yandan Latu breaks down Beijing's latest broadside at Washington in the context of growing hostility between the world's biggest economic and military powers. This is just from today. I don't know if there'll be war. I don't know if it'll be World War III. I've entertained the possibility. Some people have gotten really mad at me for doing so. Others have said I bring up really good points. The fact remains, I don't know, and neither do you. I will say I have never seen this. I've never seen things in my lifetime this bad. I mean, maybe it's not true because I was alive during the Cold War, but I was like a tiny child who didn't really know much of what was going on, watching the TV and not really understanding it. But now we've got cities being locked down, borders popping up between states. The Schengen zone is in serious trouble. The European Union seems to be in trouble. China is becoming desperate and everyone's economies are taking a hit. People are hoarding food, and there have been real skirmishes, or I shouldn't say skirmish, but real escalation between military powers in various regions, notably Western and Eastern powers. The Cold War is heating up. Does that mean we'll go into a hot war? I honestly don't know. I don't know if we'll end up seeing full-scale war or not. But Trump, Mike Pompeo, the administration, are certainly pointing the finger at China, as are these many other countries like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, etc. I don't know what a modern war would look like. Most people don't. It could be U.S. warships fighting each other. I can't imagine there would be an actual ground war. It could be drones, or everything could just fizzle away. And this could be another video that people look back on and say was sensationalist and was wrong. But let me remind you all in the future watching back that hindsight is 2020. All I see right now is a consistent escalation of tensions. The USS Theodore Roosevelt was infected with COVID. Many people said that by this, the captain of the vessel coming out and saying that, that they needed help, it made us look weak and it was the wrong thing to do. And sure enough, then we saw China do their strike group passage through the South China Sea. Then the U.S. elephant walk occurred in Guam. Then the U.S. pulled its air forces out of Guam over fears China could take them all out in one go. So the U.S. then sends in some warships. It could just be business as usual, international relations and saber rattling. Maybe that's it. Maybe I should leave it there. But keep in mind, Donald Trump did just declare a national emergency, and it could really just be because we are woefully underprepared for conflict as it is. Trump said he wanted to build a wall. We didn't have a good border. We didn't have good border security on the southern border either. It didn't mean we're looking at serious war with anybody on the southern border. What Trump is doing may just be another defensive measure, and it could be nothing. And the reason why I'm stressing that point is I know a lot of people are going to get mad and say nothing's going to happen. Everyone calm down. Possibly. I don't know. I just saw a bunch of stories once again that make me concerned something may happen in the future. So keep that in mind. I'll leave it there. Stick around. The next segment is coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.